Welcome in, folks, to the High School Huddle on this Thursday, October 21st. I'm AJ Feldman. That guy virtually next to me is Carl Jones, talking about everything Section 5, high school football, everything beyond. We got some playoffs coming up. We got Class A brackets set, locked in stone for football. Next week starts the playoffs for all the other brackets. Other sports are already getting underway. Girls soccer, boys soccer, volleyball coming up soon. So we got a lot to talk about. It's a very exciting time to be here in Section 5, isn't it, Carl?
It is, and being a guy from Ohio, I've never really been able to experience sectionals. We went straight from the regular season to the playoffs, so it's a new dynamic for me that I can't wait to cover and experience firsthand.
Now, what do you mean by that? Going from the regular season to the playoffs? What was the playoff format there in Ohio?
So in Ohio, there was no such thing as like sections. There wasn't like we weren't grouped off into different parts of the state. It was strictly you play your 10 regular season games, and then you win 5 games. And if you win your 5 games, you're a state champion. You could play a team out in Toledo, which is the western part of the state, or you could play a team out in Columbus in the second, third round. It's just depending on how the bracket shaped up. That's how it worked out. So I'm excited to actually see how, there's bragging rights on like certain areas in different parts of the state that, so being the Section 5 champion, having the bragging rights over Rochester, I think it's pretty cool. So being able to see that firsthand, I can't wait.
Yeah, a lot of the times, especially last year when we only had sectionals, kind of a big deal to, win the section. It's a lot of pride. It's obviously nice to go on that state run. For a lot of these teams, sectionals is, their high point of the season. So I know it's always a great time for them to get that brick, the block, as it's called. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those trophies there before yet, but it's a nice little trophy. We love the brick celebrations.
I haven't seen the celebrations or the trophy, but it's the first time for everything, so I can't wait.
Yeah, so last week, the big story as we get into things we've covered, the rain, the lightning, the trials and tribulations of covering high school football last Friday night. We knew it wasn't going to be super clean. And about 2 or 3 o'clock, we're looking at the weather forecast. We talked to Eric Snidel, our chief meteorologist. He's saying, thunder in the area, lightning in the area, potential tornado watches in certain parts of the area. So we knew we were going to be in for a treat. And we got all that we were advertised. I don't think there was a single game in Section 5. There might be, I could be mistaken, a single game that did not have any sort of delay, cancellation, postponement, anything like that. It was just a mess covering high school football last Friday. Carl, kind of describe your adventures of covering last Friday.
Last Friday was a mess, but I mean, it's a new experience. So, I mean, I get to write this one down in the sports reporter notebook that we all collected memories in that. But for me, I started off at Thomas and Arundicoit, and it's fine. No weather, no issues or anything of the sorts. And then I got my footage and what I needed and headed out to Spencerport to look at that game. And as soon as I arrive, I walk onto the field and boom, Zeus happens. I see a big lightning strike in the air, and 10 seconds pass, and I'm like, all right, I guess we're gonna keep going. Like, we're just gonna ignore that big boom in the sky. But obviously, the refs came onto the field and called it. And I was waiting for at least 45 minutes to an hour, probably, hoping that the game would restart. But obviously, it never did. And thank God that you were on the Twitterverse and were aware of games that did start back up. So you sent me out to Leroy and watch them take on Attica. And that was unique in itself, because for those who are listening, we have to obviously turn the show around at 11 o'clock. And I was out in Leroy, which is a decent hike, 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
And having to go all the way out there and come back and turn everything around. It was only 2 games, to be fair, because of because of the weather. But it was still just in the back of your head. You're like, yo, like, anything that could have went wrong.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about the Spencerport refs kind of running off the field when they finally called that game.
Oh yeah, no, that was the funniest part. Is I'm in the car, it's pouring raining at this point, and I'm trying to get an indication of, are they going to call this game, postpone it, like what's the deal? Because Twitter wasn't they weren't updating on Twitter as fast as I like. And all of a sudden I see refs running past me in the parking lot. So I pull down the window a little bit, just enough so I'm not getting drenched by the rain. And he goes, "Oh, it's over with. Come back tomorrow." And cool, that's all I needed to hear. Got in my car, put Leroy in the GPS, and we were out. It was just hilarious to see the refs just as excited for the game to be called as I was. So that was definitely a funny little tidbit from last Friday night.
Yeah, that game, as the refs did not know at the time, they just kind of called that game and they turned it into a forfeit just because of the scheduling and things like that. For me, I was at the big game of the night, McQuaid and Aquinas. We'll get into that game a little more for, actually what happened on the field. But, game starts at 7 o'clock, St. John Fisher, sold out crowd, great atmosphere, things like that. We get midway through the second quarter, we start getting the flashes. We're like, all right, we're calling it, whatever. Let's all get inside there. It's just about 25, 30 minutes, 25 of the 30 minutes they need for that delay to, between lightning strikes to get everybody out there. Another strike comes. So we got to wait another 30 minutes. And during that time, like you kind of said, I'm on my Twitter, varsity media, they stream a bunch of games, checking on that. Thad's actually doing some work back home to kind of find the games. He's the one who found the Leroy game started back up. So we appreciate that for working on his day off. But, we're just trying to find games to cover. Like we're, talking to our news producers being like, we might have one football game today if this thing picks up. Like we're preparing for all scenarios. Eventually, we have a news photog. He started out at Leroy. That was delayed, so we sent him over to Churchville Chi-Li. That game never even started. We tried to get him over to Penfield. Then he got pulled off to a news assignment, so we couldn't get to that. And then McQuaid Aquinas, eventually after 55 minutes, basically they start up the game. They're going to abbreviate the halftime to 3 minutes, trying to get this thing in. Early third quarter, things start flickering in the background, like it did like the distant background where, technically I think by the books we should have called it, but we all kind of just like turned a blind eye to that one. Eventually it got, not even it wasn't imminent, but it wasn't in the far distance. So I was thinking, all right, McQuaid Aquinas, sorry, it's just not meant to be. Eventually they did get it done. I actually couldn't stay for the ending just because it took so long. And they eventually had a McQuaid lineman who broke his a leg or had a leg injury, which led to a lengthy delay. So I could not stick around for the ending. It wrapped up at probably 11 o'clock, 11:05, turned into a great game. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, we've been really lucky so far with the weather this high school football season. I don't think we've busted out the rain gear at all. Fairly nice temperatures. In some instances, we're covering high school games in shorts and a t-shirt Saturday afternoons. It all caught up to us. So we were due for this weather week.
We sure were. And the next day, it wasn't as bad, obviously, with the cancellations. But I think we got introduced to fall really fast Saturday. And I feel like all of the season started to happen Saturday. I started off with wind and then the rain for my first game out in Brockport. And then all of a sudden, it just starts downpouring as soon as I'm walking to a car. I'm like, yo, this is like terrible. Like, why? Now, as the day goes on, obviously, it was a little chilly, but nothing of the sorts of the previous night. So, but yeah, definitely got introduced to the weather this past weekend.
Yeah, I got a little bit of rain on Saturday. Carl took the brunt of the storms for me on Saturday, so we always appreciate that. All right, so let's get on to the action. We'll start with the best teams that we saw this week. For me, it's an easy choice. It's McQuaid's. They top Aquinas in the game we've all been looking forward to for the entire year. But honestly, the team that McQuaid, they won the game. They came up with the stop 2-point conversion. It was Henry Koch who got the stop on the 2-point play to win that game. Bears repeating, we've said this all year long. Extra points. This is the year of the missed extra point. Aquinas actually scored the same amount of touchdowns and had an extra field goal. They lost the game by a point just because of their missed extra point, and they, then missed 2-point conversions down the road. I think this is like the 4th or 5th game we've had this year decided by missed extra points. There was the Schrader Thomas game. There was the Arcadia Athena game. There was the game that you were out to, Carl, the Batavia HFL game. I think HFL Wayne also was determined on an extra point. There certainly your other ones were probably missing. But that's kind of a side tangent. Make your extra points. It's going to be very important. Somebody's going to lose a sectional championship game on a missed extra point. Or, you know, at least a semifinal game. It's going to happen. It's just due this year. But like I said, that was a great game. You know, there was obviously a lot of stuff going on with the weather and the stoppages. So, you know, certainly plenty of caveats to this matchup. But I think the real things that stood out for me in that game was A. Collier on McQuaid and Owen Benjamin of Aquinas. Those are your two-star players for each team. And, you know, it's going to come down to when these teams most likely potentially meet in the sectional championship game. It's going to come down to whether or not the other team can stop those key players, and whether or not the secondary guys can rise up, because excuse me, it's not Owen Benjamin, it's Will Benjamin. I knew I was saying that wrong for a second, but Will Benjamin for Aquinas. I was just looking it up there. Zay Collier, dynamic receiver. He had the big interception to set up the game-winning touchdown for McQuaid. So it's really those two guys who are the stars of each of their offenses. It's going to come down to the Amaje Giddens of Aquinas's and the Sean Oberle's, who had a touchdown for McQuaid. So really, when those two teams meet again, I think it's going to come down to A, can the defenses stop those key guys? B, can the offenses scheme ways to get them the ball? Will Benjamin was doing a ton in the passing game. He was their main receiving threat as well. They were getting, you know, on some wheel routes. They were sending them out wide, getting some slants. They were running their offense through them. And then the second part, which stood out to me, which, you know, kind of indicates, you know, the reason why this game is closer. Aquinas, I thought they did a really good job of controlling the line of scrimmage. They're a pretty big team. You know, McQuaid, you know, certainly is no slouches themselves, but that battle of the line of scrimmage was closer than I thought it was going to be. And certainly, you know, high school football, that's, you know, a very big part of that game. So I think Aquinas proved a lot to me, where while McQuaid, you know, came away with the win, I think this sectional championship game is going to be a lot closer than I thought, even just last week.
Yeah, like obviously that was a talk of last week, and hopefully I'll be able to actually today I'll be able to look at the highlights of that game, and I've obviously seen the results and what we showed on TV, but all of the footage, I can't wait to actually watch that game and see it myself, because it was obviously the game of the week and big time game. So for sure. For me, I have two teams, and the only reason it's two is because Dad covered the team last week. Is the ER Gannett, the Bombers. That was the team that I saw this past week. I was impressed with them just for the simple fact that, as I've talked about the previous 2 weeks on this podcast, I'm a big fan of teams that win in all ways, shapes, and forms. And what I mean by that is, can you win ugly? And they proved that last week when they were down 15-8 in the first half, and they scored 20 unanswered to win the game. And for me, that shows that you're a team that you're not just front runners. You can win when when all things are clicking, and then you can also win when, you know, you just don't have it that day. You know, you're not feeling it. The game plan wasn't up to par. And I was very impressed with what I saw, because they didn't panic, it didn't waver. They went into halftime, and clearly whatever adjustments that they made worked. So then my other team is going to be a team that lost last week, but despite the loss, the scoreboard didn't reflect how hard they played and how I think how well they executed their game plan to an extent. Was East. They lost to Canandaigua 33-16 and that's a 3-score game. However, I was there for the first half, and the first quarter, the only score was a block punt. And then also in the first quarter, East got to Canandaigua to the 5-yard line 2 possessions in a row. So obviously, if shoulda, woulda, coulda, that I'm not going to play the if game here. However, they clearly showed that they have the ability to move the ball up and down the field on one of the best, if not the best, teams in Section 5. So they're clearly a team that has potential in that regard. And obviously, Canandaigua pulled away in that second quarter, where I think they were up 27-0 going into the half. So their talent ended up prevailing. But I was very impressed in that regard. And obviously, the two big dogs in that class are Spencerport and Canandaigua. And they lost to both. Obviously, they lost early in the regular season to Spencerport 34-12. But just like in the NFL, any given Sunday. I'm not going to predict any upsets here, but I would not be surprised if East hangs around or maybe, makes things very interesting if they're able to get past East Ridge in the first round of sectional. So that was a team that I was very impressed with despite the loss.
Yeah, we'll talk about East a little bit more when we do our Class A preview. Certainly, they're playing some of their best football right now. And East Rochester, Gananda, a good test for them as well. Anytime, you're a Class C team playing a very good Class B team in Wayne, who, took HFL right down to the wire and is one of the top teams in Class B. To beat them, that says a lot, and certainly will prepare them really well for this Class C playoffs. And then also for East Rochester, Manny Sepulveda, he's a very talented wide receiver. He's a tough guy to guard out there. And they proved they had some more weapons this week. Chauncey Gilbert, we named him our player of the week, 3 touchdowns on the ground. So I really like what the Bombers are doing over there. And they're certainly going to be obviously they're undefeated so far. They're going to be a really difficult out in the sectional playoffs.
100%. And that was a team that I hadn't seen. I've seen a lot of the, I think most at this point, outside of McQuaid, the top dogs, like you say, in each class, even down to 8-man and red jacket. But I was very intrigued with what I saw with the Bombers, and can't wait to see what they do in this playoff run.
Moving on to our under the radar teams, I'm going to go with the Penfield girls soccer team. Under the radar because, well, it's tough to call them under the radar. They are 15-1 so far this season. They are number 4 in the state in Class AA. But Class AA in girls soccer, it really, a lot of the stronger teams in this section, arguably, are in the Class A1, the A2. I think it actually just might be one Class A. But it's kind of like, Carl obviously wouldn't know about this, but last year in boys lacrosse, we had 4 teams in Class B who we all thought could beat, who were beating up on all the teams in Class A. It was just kind of a weird dynamic in lacrosse last year. It's kind of the same way this year in girls soccer, where these Class AA teams are kind of, potentially on a lower tier than some of the smaller schools. But certainly Penfield is the exception to the rule this year. 15-1 so far this season. They are the only team in Class AA to have a winning record so far this season heading into postseason play. So they're a strong favorite to make it through that bracket. They did not, Penfield didn't even make the sectional championship game last year. So certainly they're having a nice bounce back season so far this year. Some of their top contributors, Delaney Telix, 10 goals on the season, Emily Fordham, 7 goals, and then Natalie, I have trouble reading my own handwriting. Giunta looks like Casey Garofalo. I'll see if I make sure I get those right when you go for next. But they each have 6 goals on this season. And they've played everybody in Class AA. They've beaten them multiple times. Each of them, they beat at least once by at least 2 goals. So clearly a strong favorite in the Class AA brackets, and a team that, ranked 4th in the state. Maybe they'll make a deep postseason run as well. Carl, who do you have for your under the radar team so far for this week?
So my under the radar team is the one team that gave Penfield a loss this year. And
yes, it is.
It's the Greece Athena Trojans. I think they're the Trojans. If I'm not
mistaken. They are.
And I covered them when they played against Brighton, taking them down 5-2. A very good Brighton team, which is actually ranked 18th in the state right now. But I think what pops off the screen when you play against them, when you watch them play, is Rihanna Hudson. She leads the team by far and away with 22 goals. She's very athletic. She dominates that part of the field. So you got to be on your P's and Q's as a defender when she's out there on the pitch. That's the right terminology that we're going to use for soccer.
You got that right.
But when she's out there, she just jumps off the screen, and you have to keep your eye on her as a reporter, just because if she's getting the ball, if the ball's in her area, watch out, it's a chance it's going in. Or as a player out there, because she can zoom past you in a second, just because how athletic she is. But also, they're under the radar team for me, not just because of Penfield being as dominant as they are, and Spencerport getting the
national recognition,
clear deserved national recognition that they deserve. But they've also beaten Sutherland. They split them 1-1, so I think that's very impressive as well. And then also same with Rockport as well. So they've taken down some good teams, as I alluded to earlier with Penfield as well. So also Julie Welling is another one, another midfield for them that has helped out a big time for the Trojans this year. So that's another team that when they meet up in a very, very tough Class A bracket with, Brighton and Sutherland, Menden, and Spencerport, it'll be tough. So I can't wait to see if they're able to withstand all of that and come out on top. But they're a team that I believe deserves more recognition.
Yeah, and Athena has not played Spencerport so far this season, so who knows what will happen in that game if it gets to that point. And I watched a lot of Rihanna Hudson last year for Greece Athena. Did a nice feature story on her. All her teammates rave about her. Her coaches, great kid, great attitude. Last year I went to my first Athena game, and I hear someone talking next to me like, oh, she's just a freshman. She's just a freshman. You honestly knew who they were talking about because she was just dominating at 6'2". You don't see that a lot in girls soccer. In fact, I remember when I did the story last year, the U.S. women's national team, they did not have a player at 6'2". She would have been the tallest person on the U.S. women's national team last year. Her speed is tremendous. They put her through so much because she's such a dynamic threat where anytime they go on attack, it's kind of, they try and put it to her, give it to her, make her feed. So she's doing a lot on the field. She does a lot of running around out there, and she's not afraid to dish it out as well. So that's a great pick for your under the radar team. And I really am interested to see how this Class A girls soccer bracket shapes out, because while, we did talk about Spencerport, they have not been, this high and mighty Titan of the top. Mercy played a tough game with them. 1-0 was the score in that one. I know Spencerport, it's not like they're beating teams, 5-0, where, we can hand down this to, even though they're ranked nationally. It's going to be a fun bracket for sure.
100%. I think that's a great point on Spencerport. Is they're clearly well deserved of their national ranking, but let's not get it twisted here. I think some of these teams could possibly put a scare into them come sectional time. So, like you said, I just can't wait over the next 2 weeks to see how this all shapes up.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not. I'm looking at Spencerport's schedule right now to see any quote unquote other scares. These are the goals they've allowed. Did they actually tie Web? Oh wow, look at that! They last week they tied Webster Schrader. That's an impressive win for Schrader. Let's just give them some. Let's just give them a round of applause for tying them. But this is Schrader's goals allowed per game this year: 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. They have not allowed 2 goals all season long.
That's just unheard of, and goes to show you they're nationally ranked for a reason.
Yeah, I want to, that Schrader game. I want to know if everybody was playing for Spencerport or things like that, because I'm looking at Schrader's schedule. They're only 8-5 right now this season. So either they played the best game they've played all year, Spencerport had an off night, maybe all the above. But still, props to Schrader for giving them a tie.
100%.
All right, now moving on. This is the segment where usually we talk about our games of the week. We're going to dive into the Class A football bracket this time around. It's our first football bracket next week. Everything starts off for AA, B, C, D, and below, your 8-man game. But we are in action in Class A just because they have to play that crossover game between A2 and A1 to determine the state representative for Class A, is how they do it. So starting off in the A1 brackets, we have Brighton and Churchville Chili. We'll kind of use this point to talk about Brighton. They're 7-0 so far this season. I think we've both seen them play so far this season. They've been very impressive. This is one of the best stories in Section 5 this season. They've looked really good so far. They should be able to handle Churchville Chili pretty well. And Brighton's setting themselves up for a really good postseason run. They've got Brennan Klaskins, Taj Jackson. It's tough to stop Brighton.
Yeah, they're well-rounded, and I guess that's one of the things that that's big in high school football. They're not just a team who all right, we key on the running game, okay, we have a chance, or find a way to stop their perimeter attack. I think when you watch them, it's very apparent that they can threaten you in multiple ways. So that's a team that I was excited to see, especially when you guys talked about like where they've come from and stuff like that. So they're definitely a team that I have my eye on. But that entire A1 side, I think it can be interesting just because I don't know. Like Brighton is, I think it's deservingly so a 1 seed.
Yeah.
But there are teams that they've played this year that have not laid down when you play them, so to speak, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and one of those teams we'll talk about in the 2 seed, they're taking on Penfield. It is UPrep at 6-1 so far this season, facing Penfield at 1-6. This is a team that they lost Jordan Jackson earlier this year, their star wide receiver. They've transitioned to a ground and pound game. Rakim Chenier out of the backfield, Sherrod Watkins leading the way, and we talked about them 2 weeks ago, and I had not looked at the film for UPrep and talking about Sherrod Watkins. And I kind of figured they were like running all towards Sherrod Watkins. And then me and you, we both looked at this tape of UPrep. Every single touchdown run Rakim Chenier had is Sherrod Watkins pulling around from the right guard over to the left side, leading the way, just bulldozing some dude. It was so much fun. Like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it is the way to go. It's kind of a little bit, and this is not to insult UPrep at all. It's the little loop football strategy. When you're coaching little loop football, you've got, third graders, fourth graders, things like that. You get your star skill position player, you get your best lineman, you put those two guys together, you run them right behind him, and you win your championship. If you have that little loop football, you win, and they're doing that, and they're playing really good football right now.
Sometimes simple is better. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Sometimes I don't need a complex offense or complex X's and O's to get the job done. If that's what works, let's go ahead and let's just ride our way to a sectional championship or even further and beyond with this simple strategy, because it's nothing worse than knowing what's coming. They know what they're going to do, and you still can't do anything about it. So I think that's what I saw them play this past weekend. It was the same type of strategy where they just ground and pounded their way to another victory.
Yeah, and certainly they have very other talented players. Clyde Davis Jr. is a good quarterback. Mark McClary at the receiver position. They have some talented guys, but they know where their bread and butter is, and they're going to try and ride them to a sectional title. I can't wait to see if we get that sectional, that rematch in the top 2 teams in the sectional tournament. Down in the bracket, we've got Webster Schrader and Gates Chili, the 3 seed, the 6 seed. Earlier, they met on September 10th earlier this season. Schrader won 35-25. And Schrader, the story with them so far this year has been their defense. They've played some really strong defense. They couldn't quite hang with UPrep and with Brighton when they played so far this season. But they've been shutting everybody out. In fact, Gates Chili, those 25 points they put on them, the most by far of any team that Schrader beat so far this season. We saw Schrader play a 7-6 ugly rivalry game with Thomas earlier this year. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see if Schrader moves on. Can they give one of these? Well, it would be UPrep in the second round. Can their defense, defense wins championships? You get a sloppy game, a sloppy field. Who knows what happens?
You're 100%. I mean, this time of year, it's going to go home, obviously, and a couple breaks, a couple fumbles, a couple, as I like to say as a former defensive back, tips and overthrows, right? So if you get a couple of those a game, all bets are off. So, I mean, as long as you have a strong defense this time of year, you can ride them to a championship if things break your way.
Especially if you have a strong defense and you can somehow scheme a way to stop the Rakim Chenier, Sherrod Watkins show. If you can slow that down, make them beat you in other ways, Schrader definitely has the defense to maybe do something along that lines. And then the 4-5 matchup in this bracket, which is the game that Carl just watched this past week. Webster Thomas at 4-3, hosting Irondequoit at 3-4. You're the expert. You watched this game. Kind of give me what you saw last week before the rain came down.
Yeah. So basically, what I saw with Irondequoit is that they were a team, especially early on in the game. Obviously, I was only there for the early part of the game, but they can move the ball. The issue was, as I alluded to earlier, and anybody who's a Buffalo Bills fan, I think we kind of relate to this, punching the ball in the end zone when you're in the red zone. So that was an issue that they clearly had because they were shut out in the game Friday night. So Thomas clearly, I'm going to give them their credit for keeping them out of that end zone. But just because they won 21-0, I don't think the score is really indicative on how well McQuaid was moving the ball up and down the field. However, so I mean, I think both teams are kind of aware that this isn't like a layover game. Both teams are going to have to be prepared to come and play this game. However, I'm interested if Thomas is able to move on and win this game, how they'll deal with Brighton, because that was a game that was a one-score game back when they met earlier in the season. So obviously, I'm not looking ahead or nothing like that. McQuaid is nothing to mess around with. I'm just interested to see how Thomas will match up in the next round if Brighton were able to advance as well, if they were able to beat them.
Yeah, McQuaid is a team that so far this season has had a lot of trouble scoring in the red zone, in any zone. They put up 13 points on a tough Schrader defense, got 14 in a comeback. Well, I don't know if it was a comeback. It was a very close win against Penfield. They only put up 6 on UPrep. They got 42 in that Crazy Gates Chi game we couldn't get out to. And then 21 against Churchville Chi, 15 against Brighton, and then the shutout, which was only in basically a half or 2 and change quarters of play that they got the chance to play that game. But yeah, especially, Webster Thomas has been a tricky team all year. Eli Adams, we've talked about him a lot, dual threat quarterback. We thought that they were potentially the top dog in this class earlier this season. They've kind of fallen off a little bit, so maybe they can find some of that Eli Adams magic and go on a playoff run here. Moving to Class A2 now, we got our first matchup, Greece Olympia Odyssey taking on Canandaigua. Not many teams in the state can give Canandaigua a run for their money. Greece Olympia Odyssey, unfortunately, is not one of them. But I just want to take this time to talk about Canandaigua. We've talked about them before. When they potentially meet up with Spencerport in the sectional championship game, I think Canandaigua did a good job of dealing with the Spencerport, the triple wing, the double wing in that game so far this season. And if Spencerport's going to take them down, they're going to have to play a perfect ball game. They're going to have no turnovers on offense. They're going to have to find 1 or 2 on defense. What Spencerport was kind of doing in that game is they were doing the Madden strategy. Because if you ever played Madden online with your friends, something like that, you want to try and time out the drives as much as possible. So you get that end of the first half drive, you leave them with 0 time left on the clock, and you manufacture that extra possession, because that's so important to, especially in Madden when really tough to get stops. They were trying to manufacture that extra possession. They actually started the game with an onside kick recovery. So I'll be interesting to see if we get that sectional rematch game, or that rematch in the sectional championship game, how that one shakes out, because we've seen them both multiple times. Canandaigua, we've talked about them a lot. They're really good.
Really, really good team. And as we've talked about, and you and Thad would know better than I would, but we talked about Brighton's variety. Canandaigua, they really have several players who can not only contribute, but can go from take it to the crib, so to speak, or take it take it for 6 on any given play. And I think that's what's very impressive at the high school level, because at the high school level, obviously, you're usually a 1 or 2 man band show, but Canandaigua clearly has at least 4 or 5 who are able to contribute in major ways on offense.
Yeah, you could argue that in class, in A2, the most dynamic ways to score so far this year has been Canandaigua throwing the ball, Canandaigua running the ball, and then their special teams unit, which can do a lot. They did, they had 7 return touchdowns last year. Their teams are not really kicking to them that much this year, but they're still getting some scores. They can beat you in all certain which ways, indeed. So taking a look at the 2-7 matchup, it's Spencerport Brockport. This was a game that Carl was at earlier this season, where Spencerport won 40-27. Wasn't quite as close as the score indicated, but I believe Brockport gave Spencerport their toughest run for its money score-wise, other than the Canandaigua game, which they lost so far this season.
Yeah, and obviously the score didn't indicate I guess the feel of being at that game. But the one thing that was apparent, Brockport didn't struggle moving the ball. And I think that's a huge thing this time of year, is that if you can find something on film that worked against a team that is dominant and as good as Spencerport, you clearly have some type of confidence or feeling going into this game that, hey, I got a chance. Even though we're the 7th seed, big underdogs, whoop-de-whoop, okay, that's cool. but there's something that we did in that first game that worked. Now, can we dial it in a little bit more and figure out other things and hone in that area? Crazier things have happened in high school sports. So, I mean, I'm not predicting any upset or anything like that, but Brockport clearly found a way to move the ball against Spencerport earlier in the year. And if they can dip into that magic a little bit more and then do a little bit more praying in other areas and find a way to stop that wing T, who knows?
Yeah, especially with a team like Spencerport, which, you know, is so ground heavy, doesn't have a ton of, you know, prolific, excuse me, action in the passing game. If they can, Brockport, get the ball first, score 7-0, get a stop on defense, get a field goal, maybe a touchdown, I'm not going to say Spencerport is going to worry by any stretch of the imagination. They're a well-coached team. They're a well-oiled machine. But if you're a wing T offense and you're down 14-0, 10-0, you're not going to panic because they can score in 2 plays on that, that offense. But it's going to make you think a little bit.
100%. I mean, they're humans just like anyone else. I mean, any small doubt in an athlete, no matter the level, can affect you in the smallest ways. It can be big in the big picture of an actual football game when things are flying around at live speed. So, couple bad bounces, couple bad breaks. Who knows?
Yeah, and so who knows? Maybe that'll be our big shocker upset, and we can clip this out and we can say, hey, we didn't call it, but we certainly said it might be able to happen there. Our 3 seed matchup in this bracket, East / World of Inquiry. Shout out to World of Inquiry, taking on East Ridge at 2-5 at the 6th seed. This game was a 19-8 a game earlier this season when they met in September, with East coming out on top. East is a team. They were a young team to start the year. They were so young. I went out and did a little preview story of them in training camp, and their coach even said to me, like, I think they're going to be good. I don't know. We haven't seen it was like the most honest interview I've ever heard. I was like, we think they might be good. And, they've certainly picked up as the season went along. You already just talked about how they, showed some pretty impressive stuff against Canandaigua. I think just to highlight how much East has grown, when East played Spencerport, it was not close at all. That was just a Spencerport domination. And I think, this is probably going to be the 2-3 matchup, Spencerport East. I think it's going to be a lot closer than what we saw the first time out. So I think the East Eagles are a team that's kind of getting right at the right time. They've got 2 top dogs to try and knock out. They'd have to knock off both of them, but certainly they're having a good finish to their season.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the one thing that is obvious when you watch them is that they're very athletic in the positions that you need to be. So, I mean, once again, as we talked about, it's a theme this time of year. When you know that if you lose, chance of you going home, obviously, so you might tense up a little bit more in certain situations. And if you tense up just enough, hesitate just enough, think twice in certain situations, that speed and athleticism of East can take things to take it 75 yards to the house really fast. So that's a team that you don't want to second guess yourself against, because if you do, you're watching band strike up, even though there's no band, but you get the point.
I wish there were more bands in high school football around here. We need more bands. There's some good ones out there, but yeah, just to kind of to not cut East Ridge some slack here. When East and East Ridge played, it was 19-8. East was able to come out with the win. Other than those Spencerport and Canandaigua games, East has just been blowing everybody out that they've played the rest of the season. They beat Arcadia 45-0 first game of the season. Aliati 54-0. Brockport 42-17. Athena 40-12. So East Ridge has been able, first game they held it with 19 points. So Lancers have had a kind of a difficult season so far this year, but maybe there's some non-film there that they can build off of to make this one an interesting game on Friday nights at 6:00. And then the final game that we have in the Class A bracket first round is a game that we were both at earlier this season. It was Arcadia Athena, one of the best games of the Section 5 season so far this year. We had great crowds on each side. Homecoming night came down to the wire, and it was just a hard-fought game. This was one of those extra points wins games type of game. Arcadia got its extra points. Athena missed it. They missed the field goal to get the 14-12 win. And, the thing that both stood out to us in that game, Latrell Rowe, the receiver / defensive back, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in that game. Athena's going to have to figure out how to stop them if they want to, make this a different story this time around.
Yeah, on both sides of the ball. A, don't throw his way, and then B, find a way to not let him get the ball on offense. But yeah, just obviously, I'm sure they'll dive into the film and figure out what went wrong in that game. But for that to be my first high school game, covering and obviously by your side, was really cool dealing with the atmosphere and the fans. I know it was homecoming night, but I think this time around with it being win or go home, both in the Greece community, I think it'll be pretty cool. And I can't wait to see, I guess, 2 fairly evenly matched teams battling out to get the right to move on.
Yeah, and Arcadia, they rightfully won the crown of the top team in Greece with that regular season win. I know I read the Pick and Splinters article. They were pumped up to get that win over an Athena program that have kind of beat them up the past couple of years. That crown's up for grabs again. If Athena wins in the playoffs, we got that right back there. So that'll be a really good game. That one's an early kickoff, 5:30 at Friday. So that'll be a Carl Jones game. He's going out there, so he'll get he might get the entire game in. Hopefully, it goes a little bit quicker than it did last time. That was a kind of a long game. That third quarter took a long time. So hopefully, we get a great game. We get a little bit of a quicker game this time around.
Hopefully so. And despite quicker though, let's still keep the enthusiasm and excitement around and big crowds with the lights and all that. I just can't wait. That's the game that I'm excited.
Yeah, the lights. We love the lights too. And home team scores a touchdown, the flashing lights. It's great.
Yes, it's a hell of an experience, and I'm sure it'll be 10 times better because of sectionals.
For sure, indeed. So we've got a great week of high school football coming up. We've got great action in all the other sports as well. Soccer, volleyball's regular season's coming to a close. So we'll be certainly getting that all on News 8 this week here on the High School Huddle as well. So we can't wait to watch all the action. We hope you guys do as well. It is time to break the High School Huddle. Thanks for joining us once again this week. I'm AJ Feldman. He's Carl Jones. We will see you back again next week, next Thursdays. We've got all the rest of the classes to preview. We'll have our other sports either at championship time or very close to it. So one of the most exciting weeks, certainly of the year, and we will be there to cover it all. So we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Take care and enjoy watching some high school action this week.